Hey everybody, welcome back to the Pixelists podcast, the podcast about all the nerdy things we love and enjoy. Today we have a very special episode for you. The Mighty Nein Reunited. Mighty Nein Reunited Part 1.
Yeah.
Our intros are something to be written about in legend, I think.
They are totally planned and scripted. So, as you can tell.
But how you doing today, man?
I'm doing good today. I am glad I got to experience some more Mighty Nein in my life for how little exposure I had to it. Pretty sure about 90% went over my head. So I was feverishly on the Critical Role wiki. What the heck's a cloven crystal? Why does this thing matter? What is this thing? No, I'm doing, other than I will get to the episode obviously, but in general, I'm doing well today. How are you?
I'm glad to hear it, man. I'm doing well as well. I'm very excited to talk to you about this for that very reason. Like, I'm very interested to pick your brain on what somebody who didn't watch Campaign 2 thought about all of that. And for any of you that are new to us, if you watched the Mighty Nein Reunited and you found this video and this is your first exposure to Blake and I'm Will, that's Blake. I don't know if I ever said that. We cover all Critical Role things. We do an episode on every episode of Campaign 3. We recap each episode. I have seen all 3 campaigns. Blake, however, Campaign 3 is his first full-fledged campaign, but he still agreed to watch this Mighty Nein reunion. So we got an interesting perspective here. You know, someone who's seen it, someone who hasn't. I'm sure many of you are in either basket, so hopefully we can kind of cover both. We got the here.
Campaign 2 virgin and the Chad Campaign 2er. So, I guess, disclaimer, since I haven't seen more than maybe 10 episodes of Campaign 2, be easy on me, because I definitely have no clue what a lot of stuff means or what's even really happening. So just try not to be the guy in the comment section who's like, what's up with this dude? He didn't know anything, which is true in general, but especially true for Campaign 2. So any other announcements we have, by the way, before we jump into this?
I don't think so.
Okay. We are coming out with more D&D content, by the way. So if you guys if you're a dungeon master, or you play in a campaign, or you want to play in a campaign, we'd love to know in the comments what kind of D&D content you enjoy most. Because Will and I were talking, we're like, dude, we love D&D. Let's just keep making D&D content. So we're going to keep making other content, but we really like the D&D content. So
yeah, so be on the lookout for that, and definitely let us know in the comments if that's something you're interested in, or if you're running a campaign, if you're in a campaign. You know, we just want to hear it all. Other than that, we have a little bit of a tease. Are we waiting for that for now, or are we saying it now?
Go ahead and tease it. We should tease it.
So, we're about to jump into our normal recap like we always do. We're going to recap the Mighty Nein Reunited Part 1 for you. And after that, we'll jump into our discussion. And a little bit of a tease is that we actually have a special guest that's going to be joining us for this discussion. So,
and it's not my dog walking around,
and it's not my dog,
Jeremy, that loser.
Can you imagine if we really built it up and it was just Jeremy?
I would quit. If I see his face again, I'm out.
But yeah, so
if you're not familiar, Jeremy's our friend. He's a huge douchebag.
No, he's great. He fills in when we need him to.
He's the devil incarnate.
Don't listen to those lies. Jeremy is just love. But yeah.
Okay.
So you got that to look forward to. But before that, let's jump into our recap of the Mighty Nein Reunited Part 1. Do you want to kick us off on this one?
I would love to kick us off on. Now we do, by the way, the recap always does get cut out as a separate video. So if you're watching just the recap, click the link below in the comments or in the description. It'll get you the full discussion of the episode, which, by the way, we don't know what you thought of the episode. But yeah, I'll handle the first half of the recap for a bunch of characters I never heard of before.
Yeah, you better pronounce everything correctly.
So, and Will, please just jump in and help me when I'm drowning. But
yeah, I got you.
So the story takes place 6 months after the end of Campaign 2, after the fall of Cognusa, and the destruction of Lucian. Who these people are, I don't know. But point being, it's about 6 months later. The party has, it seems like even though they've done really meaningful work, they've done so in a bit of, not in hiding. They haven't gotten the recognition that Vox Machina has gotten. And I'm not sure if that was intentional or not. But besides the fact, it's been about 6 months and everyone sort of has splintered off to their own shenanigans. So the story first opens up with Veth, who's in Nicodranus. And Veth is putting on I think of it as like a summer camp, but it's basically this camp for Wildmount wildlings, and people come from all over to learn all sorts of camp-like skills. It's near the water, so they also learn surfing. And Veth is basically getting ready to welcome their new crop of people who are coming. And one of the funnest things about this camp, other than the fact of their T-shirts with their motto "Wild Out," which typical Sam, so good at these kind of things. It's totally free, and it's actually funded by a mysterious benefactor who Veth admits she's basically laundering money for this person. An amount of money gets sent to Veth, and then they use what they can for the camp, and then they send it back clean.
Yeah, from the gentleman is the benefactor.
Thank you. Oh, is that actually a character?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought he was just saying a gentleman. Okay, yeah, the gentleman. Excuse me. Also, there is Luke, who is Veth's son. Yes. Maybe.
Yep.
Okay, great. Who Luke is trying to like learn his own like roguelike thing. So there's this funny dialogue of Luke being like, yeah, like when people go back to like their cabins at night, that's when I'm supposed to sneak around and see what they're doing. And Veth's like, maybe respect their privacy. And Luke's like, but isn't that like when I'm supposed to do it? And he's like, well, let's just do it like in very, I'll let you know when it's time to sneak and when it's time to respect people's privacy. And then there is, I think it was Veth's husband, Yeza?
Husband? Yep.
Okay, Yeza, who has their own shop. And the funny thing that Matt mentions is that it's been open for about a month. And there's been a grand opening 3 times now, which if you've ever run a business is actually very typical of starting a new business. So all that to say, all the kind of the camp shenanigans are coming together. The story leaves Veth in Nicodranus and goes over to the Cobalt Soul and Zadash. And it is where Beauregard is finishing a long day's work. And there's this really funny scene where Beauregard's like kind of getting off the clock, and a person comes up to her and she's like, I'm off the clock. Like, leave me alone. Very much done with working the day. So much so that Liam O'Brien actually jokes like, are you in character yet? Are you role playing yet? Or are you just done? So anyway, Bo goes home to her. I don't know if they're wife or just partners. I don't know if there's marriage really, but her and Yasha are Yasha's kind of being the homemaker and has put together this really great meal. Has been getting advice from their neighbor Martina Stewart on great new recipes. Yasha loves Martina. Bo is like totally done with Martina. Is like, oh, you're still here, great. And they're neighbors, so there's kind of like a little bit of that going on, kind of suburban lifestyle going on. And basically, they're just kind of like a cute, perfect couple. Like Yasha's really encouraging Bo. They're sharing about their day. They talk about how Yasha is tending to a garden that Caduceus is helping her put together. And they're like, yeah, life is, they share wine, and it's like, yeah, life's pretty good. So leaving there, we move over to a ship near the Suavain Islands. And this is the Ball Eater, which Jester corrects Matt that it's actually called the Nine Heroes.
Yeah.
And it's Jester, Ford, and Kingsley who are working on a trade route off the Menagerie Coast called A Stone's Throw. And there's some really funny dialogue where like Kingsley mentions like, well, if we're called the Stone's Throw, then doesn't that mean we've only gone like a little bit as opposed to like actually successfully trading and like moving people's stuff? And they're like, well, we're workshopping it. There's Orly, who is the navigator of the ship, who is asking Captain Ford about which way to go. There's some funny dialogue there. And then Jester, as an aside, tells Ford, hey, you should have more confidence and like tell Orly, like, hey, where do you think we should go? This is what I hire you for. And basically they talk about, their crew and what they're doing. And Ford mentions there's about 10 people on the ship entirely. We leave there. We go over to Rexentrum, to the Soltris Academy, where in a classroom, I keep want to call him Orem. Caleb is finishing a guest lecture in this classroom. And in very typical Liam O'Brien sweetness, has this really awesome like end of speech ad lib where he talks about the power of transmutation and to really think about what transmutation means for you and also how it might change you, which Caleb mentions he was never really asked, or maybe he should have been when he was younger. The gnome who's running the class dismisses, and the gnome is talking to him and says basically like, yeah, it was a little bit of a dramatic speech, but students seem to like it, I guess. Caleb then retires to go to his private practice, which is his small cottage. And it's mentioned that he also, in his spare time, mentors students who've been rejected or haven't been accepted to the Soltris Academy. And that's what's happening with him. We go back to the Nine Heroes, the ship with Ford, Jester, and Kingsley, and there is a massive storm coming from the north. And Ford, following Jester's advice, says something along the lines of like, yeah, Orly, what do you think we should do? Where should we go? And Orly basically says, this storm's coming very quickly. Like, we should probably batten down the hatches. It's around this time that Ford feels a cold sensation. And in fact, as the storm hits, he feels incredibly unsettled about what's happening. And as a massive, huge wave crashes onto the deck, Kingsley spots the head of what turns out to be a storm giant in the water of the ocean. Panic ensues. It's like there's a dude in the water. He's big. He's real big. And as a splash of a wave crashes onto the ship, Ford sees a large glowing yellow eye, the eye of Ukatoa, who says, I found you. Scions rush up onto the deck. A mage comes into combat as the storm giant begins to climb up onto the ship. Combat ensues. You can just know that pretty much everyone rolls terribly, really, for the first half of this episode. But some of the important things that happen, Kingsley immediately is fighting one of the Scions. Ford flies up into the air to kind of see the battlefield. Jester is going to run up to the storm giant and cast Inflict Wounds at the 7th level on the storm giant. And then she's going to get actually smashed by the other hand. In fact, Jester takes so much damage that she actually gets knocked unconscious. And then the mage who came into the combat, came onto the ship, basically says something along the lines of, where's the traitor, where's the key, which is a clue to Ford as to what they're looking for. He flies down, revives or heals Jester with Cure Wounds, and then basically says like, I'm sorry, like I have to do this. Into the bag of holding, pulls out the Cloven Crystal. What is that? I don't know. But pulls it out and basically hands it off to the mage after the large storm giant basically says, give it over and we'll spare you. So he hands it over. They're like, deuces, see you later. And then as they're leaving, the storm giant, punches his fist up through the ship, destroys the 9 heroes.
Not cool.
And yeah, not cool. Kingsley has a boat in a box, I guess. Pops up this little rowboat. Everyone climbs in. They do lose someone to the storm. And I think I'm jumping actually into your half. So why don't you take it from there?
Yeah. Also, excellent job, by the way, on the first half there for, not being familiar with anything, basically. Well done. All right. So we pick up with the second half with the crew on this, makeshift boat that Kingsley has provided, basically rowing to the nearest landmass. While this is happening, Jester decides to send some messages out. She first contacts Caleb, fills him in on everything that just happened and where roughly they are, believing it to be near the Twinward Isles, being the landmass that they are currently rowing towards. Excuse me. She then sends a message to Veth and basically tells her the same thing. They then make their way to land, set up camp for the night, and Ford basically really quickly catches Kingsley up on everything that's going on with Ukatoa.
Yeah, thank you for asking, by the way, Taliesin, because I was like, yeah, what? Who's Ukatoa?
What's happening?
Yeah.
So we cut to Caleb, who immediately whips out his sending stone to Bo. He and Bo have a little sending stone telephone line with each other, and tells her everything that's happening and tells her that he's on the way to come get them. So prepare. He then teleports to the Bernardo household, which is Beth's house, to pick her up first. Grabs her really quick. She says some very quick goodbyes to her family, grabs her things, and then they head out and they head to Bo and Yasha's house by teleportation via Caleb. When they arrive, they briefly talk about, okay, what do we need to prepare? What should we do? Who should we call? Should we call Caduceus? And no one can actually, in this current gathering of heroes, no one can communicate to Caduceus. But Yasha's like, oh, wait, I can. And this is kind of an inside joke from Campaign 2. We'll probably talk about it a little more in the discussion. So she tries to contact Caduceus, but doesn't hear anything back. So the four of them gather together, and Caleb teleports them as close as he can to the Twinward Isles. But he's only vaguely familiar with this place because he's never actually been there. He's just seen it whilst traveling in the past. So because of that, the teleport is a bit riskier than it would normally be. And as he does it, everyone takes force damage as they're kind of like shunted through the ether. And they actually fall into the ocean about a half-mile away from the actual Twinward Isles. But no big deal. We got some strong swimmers, and Caleb polymorphs into a shark. So they easily make it to the beach where they all reunite. All the Mighty Nine finally reunite, except Caduceus, with hugs and kind of some friendly ribbing before Ford tells everybody the full story of what happened and how they need to race the clock to stop Ukatoa from being released. Problem is, they aren't exactly sure where the last seal is and where they should therefore be headed. So Ford kind of starts explaining to everyone the dreams he's been having recently and decides to cast Major Image to kind of paint a literal picture of the dream he's been having so everyone can see. Then the party basically deduces based on these lights, more than likely representing cities or lighthouses, they can kind of figure out where they need to go. And
it's about 45 minutes, I feel like, of could it be this? Could we figure out this way? Or
yeah, exactly. But they ultimately figure out that it is. No, you're fine.
I was going to say, including Matt being like, it's on the map, and then finally realizing, oh, it's actually not on the map. Yeah, which is why they couldn't locate it. So
yeah, that was hilarious. But at the end all be all, they figure out that it is the Sirios End Forest, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Is where they need to go. So now with the tangible destination, the crew makes plans to actually get there. But they're like, well, what are we going to do with like our literal crew from the 9 heroes that's shipwrecked with us? So they try to figure that out. But then they're like, oh yeah, wait, we could use Yusa's teleportation circle in his tower and get everybody to Nicodranus, and that'll work. So Jester sends Yusa a message and is like, hey, can we use your tower? We're going to be in and out. Like, you won't even have to talk to us. And Yusa is like, yeah, okay, whatever. So they all teleport, including the crew, to the tower. Winsworth is there, who is like Yusa's goblin butler, basically. And he basically leads them immediately out. And the party and the crew are now in Nicodranus. And Kingsley's like, hey, we got to make sure the crew is taken care of, like, after everything they've been through tonight. So Ford gives Orly 100 gold and the crew is headed off to the lavish chateau where they're going to get some really nice rooms for the night. Meanwhile, Jester leads the Mighty Nine to her and Ford's place where everyone takes a long rest. The next morning, the group plans on how exactly they're going to make their way to the forest. Caleb's never been there before. He's never even seen it, so he can't teleport them safely. So there's a lot of discussion about exactly how they want to do it, but they ultimately, well, actually, while they're discussing, Jester scries on that mage from the ship battle at the beginning of the episode to see what they're up to, and she can see that the mage still has the crystal and is kind of traveling through the jungle, the forest, with the sea giant behind the mage. The giant actually picks up the mage and puts them on its shoulder. So Jester comes out of the scry, fills everybody in on where she thinks they are, and the group ultimately then decides, okay, let's teleport to the Wyung Gate, and then we'll have Jester, Caleb, and Ford, transform into eagles and carry everyone the rest of the way to the forest.
Which, by the way, as someone who never watched, I was like, okay, wait, hold up. Like, you guys can do what now? But anyway, continue.
So that's what they do. And so they turn into eagles, and there's about an hour duration for the polymorph. So after that hour, they all kind of land into the forest, some being more graceful than others with the landing. A highlight being that Bo hits a 3-point landing, Veth then hits a 3-point landing on top of Bo, and Kingsley hits a 3-point landing on top of Veth. And Kingsley says, like, as they were flying in on the eagles, he did see the sea giant like in the forest, and that actually the Mighty Nine have kind of advantageous positioning with where they are. So then they're trekking through the jungle, and the first thing they come across is this abandoned camp, and Bo scavenges through and finds a healing potion, I believe, and then like this torn, dilapidated journal. She's able to make out a little bit of the text on it, and it speaks of the sun being dead, an endless source of venomous snakes, a nightmare curse on the stones, and something about the light of M. Like the first letter starts with an M, and then the rest is illegible, so they're not exactly sure what to make from that. But the light of M seems to begin their exodus from hiding, and the writer of this wasn't sure when it would stop. So they're like, okay, what do we make of this? Caleb then is leading the next part of the trek through the jungle, and the next thing they come across is this statue partially hidden by the roots of a thick tree. Come to find out, it's actually a carving of the Wild Mother, and they think that her temple is likely nearby. Jester's able to kind of rip some of these thick tree roots out of the way and expose more of the statue, revealing this like jade gem embedded within it. Caleb identifies this gem and finds that it has like this divine essence that brings a blessing of luck, good faith, and goodwill to whoever wields it. Ford then pries it from the statue pretty easily, and it feels warm to his hand. Veth touches it and feels nothing. So Kingsley notices that the statue is like pointing a direction. I want to say it's northwest, and is like, hey, trigonometry, we should go northwest. So they're like, okay. And so the crew starts heading in that direction, and after a bit they come across this monkey, and it's kind of hooting and hollering every once in a while, and Jester tries to bribe it with pastries. So they keep going, and they notice that it's following them. Bo, actually distracted by the monkey, steps into this like fungus patch, and spores kind of go up and affect the party, causing a few of them to take damage and Jester to get the poisoned condition. Jester then uses, I believe it's the magic mouth spell or something like that, to try to emulate the monkey and leave this emulation like recording basically behind them to see if she can maybe distract the monkey and or whatever else. They continue on.
I liked that part though, where Matt's like, what does the spell say it does? And then Travis like jumped in and was like, basically not at all what she's trying to use it for.
Yeah, classic, right?
So.
So they continue on, and they eventually find what appears to be like ruins in the entrance to perhaps this temple of the Wild Mother. But they can also hear the creaking footsteps of the giant nearby. Beth decides to investigate further, and up some kind of ruined stairs, she does seem to see a pathway that goes deeper into the temple. So she alerts the rest of the Mighty Nine, and so they decide to just make a break for it. So they're sprinting for this entrance basically as the storm giant is like crushing through the trees, also arriving on the scene, and that's where the session ends. Um, Episode 1 of the Mighty Nine Reunited. I can't say that for some reason.
Why is that so hard for you?
I don't know.
All right. Well, if you've made it this far, you've checked out our recap. We want to know what you thought of the whole episode. We're going to jump into our full episode discussion, and we're going to break just very quickly for just a second to bring on a special guest to the podcast who you're going to see join us in 3, 2, 1.
Whoa.
And we're back. Hey, so we had to bring in, since I don't quite have the experience from campaign 2, we had to bring in another expert, a fellow YouTuber who enjoys our channel, and we also enjoy his channel. We're bringing in Ken from Cy and Bella Reactions. You can find out more at Cy Bella on YouTube. They're a critter channel. They react to all sorts of shows, not just D&D and Legends of Vox Machina, but also there's some Disney shows on there, some Marvel shows on there, and other shows that you absolutely got to go check out and subscribe to. And Ken is joining us because he loves D&D and Critical Role just like we do, and we love this channel.
Sure.
So Ken, thank you for being here today. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, man.
Guys, appreciate the opportunity to come and talk with fellow critters about the show and people and characters that we all love.
Well, brother, isn't that the fun of it? Is like, I feel like D&D is such a connector, especially like critterdom. You know, like meeting a fellow Critical Role enjoyer, I think is always really great. So it's really great to have you on the channel.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, and Ken, you and I briefly talked about this, but just so everybody else knows, tell us, quickly about how you found Critical Role. Have you seen, all the campaigns?
So my D&D pedigree goes way back to like early grade school, where I played one time with people and then played by myself forever.
That's the way it goes, right? That is so true.
Yeah, so I literally owned the Redbox version of advanced D&D with the gray crappy dice and all that stuff, and I would, ride my bike to the hobby shop to buy campaign modules and
man, that's great.
So I was very familiar with D&D, and then sometime about the middle of campaign 2, I'm not quite sure exactly where it was, I just randomly got served a clip. It was something like Grog pulls 4 cards from the deck of many things, and I was like, oh crap, that would destroy a party. I've got to see what happens there. And then I just got sunk into critterdom, and I literally went back, watched every episode of everything they made in order, and I caught up to the live stream right before campaign 2 ended, just an episode or two.
That's awesome.
Before they finished. So I've literally watched every episode of campaign 1, campaign 2, campaign 3, all of the Talks Machina, all of the Four-Sided Dives, all everything they made that was related. Even Will Friedle's mini painting episodes. I watched all of it.
I'm just curious, as someone who was so I got into D&D after watching Critical Role. I was a little familiar with it as a kid. My mom bought me like one of those box set like module things, but I didn't have to play with it, and so it got shelved or whatever. As someone who is a lifelong D&Der and then discovering Critical Role, what was that like?
Well, I started on D&D, but when I moved to California and I lost all my friends in that process, I kind of lost D&D also. I stayed in role playing, but I would game master for a system called Shadowrun, which is just a different role playing game. It's modern day with magic and elves and guns and that kind of stuff. Very familiar with the concept of role playing and TTRPGs, but I haven't really been a D&D guy my whole life. Just early is how
Yeah.
I started. So, but the experience of seeing these people just become these characters, they
Yeah.
literally just embody this stuff,
That's
and
amazing.
it's so immersive and so captivating.
Yeah.
I was an instant fan, and I had literally never even heard of Pathfinder, which was the system they were using to start with.
Right.
But it didn't matter, right? Because these guys are just amazing at what they do, and
Yeah. They're incredible. And before we jump into the discussion of this episode, really quick, Ken, let's give a shout out to your channel. Tell us really quick, why do you have the channel? What do you love about the channel? What do you do on the channel? And then we'll jump into the discussion.
got it. So we're a reaction channel. We react to a mixture of music videos, episodic shows. We've dived heavily into all of the Marvel episodic shows, the 6 and 9 episode shows. Um, dabbling in anime, and really we started the channel right around when season 1 of Legends of Vox Machina came out, and that was when I found you guys because we really enjoyed Will's breakdowns, the Easter egg stuff, because that was a lot of really good details, and unless you do it the way he did, like diving in and slow frame by frame identifying every detail. So we really just enjoy interacting with people in the comments, and finding new artists in the music realm. And we recently went to a concert for a big Filipino band that's breaking out into the world scene, and that was so amazing. We had our subscribers coming up to the concert saying, "Hey, we watch your videos. Can we take a picture?"
Oh, that's so cool.
I was like,
Oh man.
I had no idea that would happen. That was
Oh man.
amazing.
That's
So
special. Well, it's great to have you on the show, and thank you for shouting out Will. For you guys who maybe you haven't checked out some of our other content, Will, if you've checked out the Amazon show Legend of Vox Machina, Will has actually done a really awesome set of videos, Easter egg breakdowns of like the little details that are from Campaign 1, and I'm sure, Will, it was excruciating to put them together because I know you worked on one for like 6 hours and then you lost the whole. You lost the whole video and had to start over, but
Yeah, it was fun. I was also teaching myself video editing at the same time, so it was definitely a process.
So speaking of Legends of Vox Machina, let's get back to Critical Role. We're going to be talking about our thoughts on Mighty Nein Reunited Part 1. And again, if you've missed the recap, again, you can go back and watch that in the description. And then also, we want to know what you thought about the episode, so don't be a stranger. Let us know in the comments what you think about it. Spoiler alert, this will be an extremely spoiler heavy discussion naturally because we're talking about this group of characters that's from Campaign 2. So if you're still watching Campaign 2, you think you might go back and watch it, which, I don't know how much time you have. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. But all that to say, just know right now we're going to be diving heavily into spoilers. So we are officially into spoiler territory. So that is our alert. Having said that, Will and Ken, you guys are the Critical Role experts compared to me. What was it like seeing the Mighty Nein returned?
Ken, go first. You're the guest.
Yeah, I guess I'll start off. I was lucky enough to have access to a theater performance of the show. I could easily have stayed home and watched it, but this is the first time that I was able to go and watch an episode in a theater, and I have to say it was a little special. Like there was sold out, first of all. Every seat was full. Not a huge theater, but every seat was full. And I'm not in a major area. I'm outside Sacramento in California. But there were still a handful of cosplays. There was a pretty good Laudna.
Oh man.
There were a couple of different Yashas there. One, two Chetney. I saw a really good bow regard. And everyone was decked out head to toe in like merch. I felt like a poser because I've got my my Vox Machina
basic
shirt, but
T-shirt.
there were people there that were like literally carrying armfuls of plushies and wearing head to toe. It was ridiculous.
That's cool.
Was
I love that. Theater experience, though. That's awesome. I love that.
I'm jealous.
It was neat. And I met a couple of people around me, and as you do, you exchange how did you learn about Critical Role, and that's always fun because every critter has like an origin story.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And
yeah. Will, what did you think about the episode?
It was fun. It felt like seeing some old friends you hadn't seen in a long time. I've seen a lot of people kind of describe it that way. A lot of people that started with campaign 2 were just like, man, it felt like I was coming home, which is exactly how I felt with the campaign 1 kind of return tos after campaign 1 ended, because that's the campaign I started in. So it didn't have that same like super hit of nostalgia for me, because that's campaign 1 for me, but it still was like, I'm really happy to see all these characters that I grew to love again. And it was just kind of funny seeing everybody kind of try to find that same gear, which I'm sure was a bit rusty after like a year and a half. But honestly, one of my favorite moments, and Ken, I'd love to hear what this was like in the theater, but when because they didn't open with the intro, so I was like, oh, are they just not going to do it? But then when they had the campaign 2 intro pop in after the prologue, I just missed that intro so much. It was so hype. And so I can only imagine, like, were people singing along in the theater, or what was the reaction there?
I kind of expected singing, but sound system in there is so immense that it kind of drowned it out. If people were singing, I couldn't tell, but there was definitely a big cheer when it, like people were like excited that it was about to happen, right?
Yeah.
So I couldn't really discern that there were people singing along, but I'm sure I kind of was, right? Like,
yeah.
Dude, that video was awesome. I had seen it once before. I don't remember where, because it wasn't in early campaign 2, but I know campaign 3's had a couple of different, I guess probably 3 now, different intros. But I was and they're fine. But watching that one, I was like, this is really cool.
Yeah.
Like, when do we get the campaign 3 version? Because this is awesome.
Yeah, I hope we do.
So, no, that's cool. Yeah, I like the episode. I didn't think it was too. I mean, there were definitely like a lot of details where I was like, okay, what is that? Like, what? I was Ken, I was joking with Will how I was like, okay, let me Google cloven crystal, because no idea what this thing is. And there were other details that like kind of threw me, because I was like, I didn't know if they were rusty, or because I was like, wait, Ford's British? I thought he had like a country, western accent. So that threw me. And then I told him too, what confused me also was, I was like, who the heck is Veth? Because also I always knew Not, who was the goblin with the bandages. And then Not's also in that video that we're talking about. There's a lot of scenes with Not, but I didn't see Veth. And so I'm like, who the heck is Veth? And so
all huge spoiler questions.
Yeah.
And then Kingsley too. I was like, who is Kingsley? And like, because I know Molly Mock died. I know Caduceus was his new character. But then I was like, well, wait. And then I was telling Will the character little profile popped up when it was his turn or whatever. And it was Kingsley Tea Leaf, which I know was Molly Mock Tea Leaf, which I was like, okay, it couldn't be his son because he's too old. So is it his brother then? And Will was like, well, you'll just have to wait and we'll talk about it. But
so Will, you want to answer the question about Kingsley, and I'll take the not questions?
Okay, yeah. So yeah, Blake hit me with all these questions, and I was like, this is hilarious. Let's talk about this on the podcast. So, because you're in like a unique position of, you did see like 10 to 12 episodes of campaign 2. So Blake did have like a baseline. So those of you that have seen all of campaign 2,
I generally know the characters, because like I know Not was a thief. also, because I remember
Yeah.
there was a scene early on where Not was trying to steal things, and I saw the character profile for Veth, also a rogue. So I'm like, did Not die and then rolled another rogue? That doesn't make sense. So
Yes.
then, anyway,
Yeah, so
continue.
it's just funny. You're in like the perfect like scenario to have these like really interesting questions about what was going on. So yeah, the Kingsley one, I'll tackle that one. This is a lot. And again, we already gave the spoiler warning, but again, in case you're like mid campaign too. So correct, Molly Mock was Talison's original character that died. So he had to make Caduceus. Then like, and bear with me on the numbers, they're not exact. Like 70 episodes later in the campaign, they decide to go visit Molly's grave and find that he's gone. Like it's dug up. And they're like, okay, whoa, what's going on here?
Okay.
And then to save everyone, the hour and a half of me wildly just rambling, the big bad essentially of campaign 2 is this character
It was
named
Lucian, I'm
Lucian.
assuming.
Yes.
Okay. And Lucian lives in Cognusa, or is like the town or something? Oh, okay.
He goes there.
Cognusa. I didn't know if that was like, this is my crib, yo. Like, this is my place. Like, we destroyed it. I don't know.
So Lucian is actually Molly in a way. Like, they're not the same person, but Molly, how can I do this? Molly was like a fragment of Lucian. Lucian was his own. Lucian existed before Molly.
Okay.
Lucian was then basically taken out, essentially. And
Lucian was killed.
Yeah, like purposefully, like with intent to like scatter him, essentially. I know this isn't making much sense.
Okay. Is this related to the Luxon? Because you said
not really
in camp. Okay, just kidding. Pretend I didn't ask that then.
So Molly
Never mind.
is like a fragment of Lucian that like inhabited the body and had its own life, and then that was the events of early campaign 2. So when Molly died, Lucian was able to eventually regain control of his body and is like the big bad of campaign 2. Lucian is then defeated at the end of campaign 2, and through a crazy I want to say, Ken, was it divine intervention? I don't remember what spell it was.
Don't remember the exact mechanism, but somehow.
Yeah. But in like a really poetic, like amazing moment of campaign 2, Taliesin, the original player of Molly, I think it's divine intervention, some spell, like rolls exactly what he needed to for it to like work, and like pleads with the Wild Mother to like restore their true friend. And so Kingsley comes back. So it's not really Molly, nor is it Lucian. It's like a fully like healed soul. This is all my own interpretation because it's kind of muddy. And so he's neither Molly nor Lucian, but he's Kingsley. It's like a new kind of like cleansed in a way, fresh soul. And he wanted to be called Kingsley. Like he's like, I don't feel like he didn't want to use the name Molly.
Did he start role playing as Kingsley at that point? And like Caduceus
well, that was literally like the last 30 minutes of the last episode.
Yeah.
Okay.
We don't even know Kingsley.
Right.
We've never experienced any Kingsley role play except for like that last tiny little prologue moment.
Okay, cool.
Epilogue? Prologue?
Yeah.
Epilogue, yeah.
Yeah.
And then are there other fragments that are like out and about? Or
I don't think so. I think there was just like one that found Lucian's body and became Molly type of thing.
Okay, yeah. Interesting.
A piece of the whole, if you will. But yeah, so Kingsley is apparently like a new whole. But yeah, he
okay. Interesting.
This was the first really we have gotten to see of Kingsley actually in action.
Which explains why he keeps saying things like in this episode, I don't know if any of these stories jesters are telling me is true, and I'm loving the, all of this stuff, right? Like
that's why he didn't know about Uk'otoa.
Like that.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
He wasn't there for that.
All right, then how about Not and Veth?
Okay, so I'll try to do this as simply as possible. Not is Veth. not is the result of a curse that was placed on Veth Brenado. Veth is the core character, a halfling rogue. Halfling? Yeah.
Yeah.
Halfling rogue that messed with like a local goblin tribe, and the goblin tribe was angry with her. I forget the exact details, but essentially what happened is they drowned her in a river and then got a hag to curse her into the form of a goblin.
Oh, okay. That actually makes sense.
Then later on in the campaign, they managed to reverse that that curse, and so we get Veth back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I love Not. Not is an amazing, amazing, amazing character. And Veth is basically just a continuation without like the goblinness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay. Okay. Oh, and then Ford's country accent becoming British.
Yeah. So
Ford has 3 different accents during the course of the Mighty Nine. I saw somebody on Twitter the other day say, "Oh, I can't wait to hear Ford's accent." I'm like, "Which one? Beginning, middle, or end?" Because he literally changes accents, and has in-game reasons for it. Like he's like was pretending to have that accent for some reason. I forget what it was, and then it shifts again later, and he has yet another roleplay reason. Do you remember what those were?
Yeah, so originally, he was that southern drawl, like the text blade, and that's because
Eldritch Blade.
his mentor Vandrin had that same accent, and that was someone he looked up to. And when he was kind of out on his own, he wanted to emulate like that strength and wanted to be respected like Vandrin was. So he's like, I'm going to use that same voice. Like that was just his way of kind of trying to be what he wasn't yet. So then later in the campaign, he kind of just accepts who he is, and that British accent is his real accent.
Oh, okay, cool. Well, it's funny that you say that though, because I don't know if you remember this, Will, but I remember when we watched campaign 2, we watched it together, first 8, 9, 10 episodes, and we talked about the details being there that Ford was hiding something. Like, what is it that and we talked about he might even be like secretly, like a different race somehow. Like we're like, how could this be possible?
Yeah, I
so
think
it's funny that
early on in a dream, there was like a dream sequence, and he used his real voice, and so we were all like, "Wait, what the heck? Why does he have a different voice?"
Yeah, something like that. Oh yeah, okay, cool. All right, for everyone who had already seen campaign 2, thank you for sitting through that deep dive. Let's talk about the actual content of this episode, which before we get to like the meat of it, which seems to be Uk'otoa and reclaiming the Cloven Crystal. What were some of the cool details or Easter eggs that popped up in each person's, not origin story, but kind of like return to each person's storyline? What jumped out to you guys that you really appreciated?
I I really liked what they did. I feel like the majority of this first episode of this 2 shot was basically fan service, right? Like everybody wanted to see Yasha and Bo cohabitating domestically. Everybody wanted to see what's Luke up to and how, what's this little family unit. Because for most of the campaign, /not stayed well away from her family. This was a pre-existing family that she had. So, yeah, there was a lot of fan service. And then I enjoyed the fact that we're literally having trouble remembering things. Like they called their ship, or Matt called their ship the Ball Eater, but they literally had renamed the ship during the campaign. That was not its current name, right? Like, yeah. So little things like that, where they're catching their stride and falling back into the patterns, and man, Laura Bailey is such a master.
Yeah.
From the drop, she was Jester 100%. It was stunning. I loved it.
Yeah, she should look into being an actress, because I think she's
Yeah,
she's pretty good at it. But no, I felt the same way. I mean, there's a lot of sex, a lot of
Oh,
horniness.
that was so funny. Matt was like, "It's a really horny episode, more than I would expected for you guys."
Yeah,
But
which is saying something. So I thought that was hilarious, and everyone kind of trying to one up each other in that regard.
yeah,
As far as like Easter eggs, I mean, I didn't really. I mean, I'm sure there were like slight nods and stuff, but nothing like overt that I picked up on. I just thought it was interesting to kind of see the lives everyone was leading. And for those of you that saw campaign 2, um we kind of get like an epilogue for every character. Like Matt kind of says, like not necessarily like 50 years from now what's going on, but you're allowed to kind of give like without a time limit on it, like this is what Ford does, he and yada yada yada. So I was trying to place, because this is only 6 months after campaign 2, so for most of the characters this is probably before the epilogues that they shared.
Right.
So I just thought it was interesting to see where they were, but also how a lot of them are still struggling with the same things they were struggling with, which is kind of not sad, but just like real, if that makes sense. Like we have or Beth, excuse me, who's still, and not that she should have been like, no, I'm going to stay with my family because this is like a world ending important thing. I think she should have gone with them, but she was ready at the drop of the hat to just get out of there. She's still drinking,
Yeah.
which she took some swigs from her flask during the episode. You got Caleb, who's living alone. He just goes home to his little shack and makes his tower. Essek wasn't to be seen this episode. We had a few people mention like, let's call Essek, and Caleb didn't want to. So I feel like he's kind of still dealing with a lot of his issues that we know he was dealing with.
He did at one point put out a line of something like, "I wonder if I'll see my Hassian Kryn friend."
Yeah, he did
So
say that.
it's not like Essex gone or not present. He just isn't around right now.
Right.
Right.
who's Essek?
Oh, yeah. Essek is the target of the bisexual panic. For yeah, Essek is a major Kryn player in the overall story, and then Caleb and Essek kind of have a thing.
Oh, okay. I
Yeah,
don't know why I thought. Oh, Caleb. Oh, sorry. I was thinking Ford again because Ford's the one maybe who said something. Okay, I gotcha.
yeah, he's like a fan favorite in PC. So
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
I just thought it was interesting that, and I thought it, like, again, it was real. Like these characters, it's only 6 months removed from the campaign. They're not all living happily ever after necessarily. And not that they're like living terrible lives or anything. Like I thought it was awesome that Caleb is teaching. And I thought that RP moment was one of my favorite parts of the episode, with Caleb giving that speech to the class. So I'm not trying to be like too Debbie Downer or anything, but I just thought it was interesting that like these are characters and they still have their flaws, even at the end of the story. But on the other hand, you have Bo and Yasha, who seem to be just living their best life, so that made me happy.
Power couple for sure.
Yeah. And Yasha, new haircut.
Was Caleb's speech, was that referring to anything from campaign 2? Because he mentions like, consider how transmutation might change you, which I wish had been maybe taught to me or something. Or is that like a big...
I mean, there definitely was like some layered meanings there. I wouldn't say there's like a specific incident he was talking about, but more so just like his growth throughout the campaign, about like what he originally got into, like trying to get powerful for, and just kind of how like the journey transforms you, like make sure you're doing this for the right reasons. If you're in it for power, like who knows what you may become, so not like a spell that literally transforms you, but what like seeking power might do to you, and that type of thing.
Literally, for most of the campaign, Caleb was seeking out the power to transform Not into Veth, and they literally did do that.
True.
So it was some sort of a ritual spell that they were able to accomplish, having sort of not mastered Dunamancy, but at least explored Dunamancy, and then they built some custom thing where they were able to reverse the curse, and then transform not back into Veth. So there was a literal transformation of self for one character.
Yeah,
That's
okay.
true. Yeah.
Your question about Easter eggs, though, when Sam was describing the Wild Out camp, he described several cabins, and the names of the cabins were Easter eggs to various places and things from the campaign. So the Happy Fun cabin is a reference to basically an artifact that they found that they called the Happy Fun Ball. And there's a whole series of events that occur around and in Happy Fun Ball.
Is that the episode you've mentioned, Will, as being like a really great,
Yeah, like a good
just single episode
model
or
episode to
something?
show people. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, the Happy Fun Ball is a fantastic little sequence. And then there was the A5 cabin, and they had a map of the Aor area, this icy area where they were trying to find the city of Aor. And there were like these cryptic markings, and A5 was one of the locations on the map. I think it was the location that eventually led them into Aor, if I'm not wrong. But and then the Shikasta cabin is a reference to a character that guest starred multiple times, and this is played by Carrie Payton. You may know Carrie Payton as the King Ezekiel in The Walking Dead.
Yeah,
I love Carrie
that's
Payton.
great. Okay.
So he played a character that recurred throughout the campaign and was much loved by the fan base.
Oh, cool. Well, it's cool how someone hasn't, just like watching Will, your Easter egg videos. It's nice hearing those little details and the small like appreciations that Matt and the rest of the cast put into this first half. Let's move to the back half of the episode, or I guess right before the break, into the break in the back half. So we're on the 9 heroes. We have this attack they kept calling it a storm giant, but I didn't know if it was like sort of a homebrewed, like more of like an ocean giant, because they had like the kelp armor or something to that effect. But this attacked though from, is it fair to call them like Ukatoa's minions, or is it implied this is like a third party that wants to free Ukatoa? What was y'all's takeaway there?
Both of those things could be true.
Okay, so it's not super clear then.
They suffered multiple attacks from similar forces during the campaign, where Ukatoa was trying to, catch up with them and get back what they wanted. So definitely this is 100% related and at the direction of Ukatoa in some way, and it is an attempt to free Ukatoa.
Now,
both of those are true.
Give me some backstory here, because I went to the Critical Role wiki. I saw that there were 3 crystals, and 2 have already been placed. My understanding was all 3 have to be placed in these different temples, and that frees Ukatoa, who's been, I guess, like primordially bonded or something. But 2 have already been placed, so this is the last one, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
I think it will.
Yeah. So there's 3 cloven crystals, and throughout the campaign, Ford was originally a warlock, and Ukatoa was his patron. So Ukatoa was having Ford. Like Ford did the first 2, or at least the first one.
It seems pretty evil. Why did he?
Yeah. So,
and I'm assuming, by the way, his paladin multi-class he ascribes to the Wild Mother is what I was putting together. Okay, cool.
Yes.
So why was he placing these crystals then?
So that was kind of his arc throughout the campaign. He started as a warlock, right? And he didn't really, like, it's not like he sat down with Ukatoa and was like, all right, this is what we're going to do. Like, he didn't know what this entity was that gave him these powers. And so he was kind of discovering it as he went. And the more he learned, he eventually was like, I want no part of this.
Yeah, okay.
But by the time he fully turned away from it, 2 of the things had already been unlocked. So there was just the last one. But Ford had the cloven crystal, which is like the key to the final unlock. So ever since he turned away, Ukatoa has been sending other disciples, other minions after him to retrieve that last crystal so that he can fully be freed.
Also, as Ford was discovering that he didn't want to be a part of it, Kato would punish him by removing his powers at inopportune times. So he was trying to toe the line between being useless, you know, and and being evil, right? So eventually he found a way to break his pact, which is not easy to do. And then yeah, like you mentioned, turned to the Wild Mother as a basically as a replacement patron, sort of.
Yeah. Kind of maybe, sort of maybe what's going on in campaign 3 too. I mean, it remains to be seen with what exactly is going on with Laudna, but
It does seem like the Sun Tree, there's some kind of definitely analogous to that for sure, is what it feels like.
and those were some awesome moments in campaign 2, that whole like arc of him breaking the pact. But not to get lost in the sauce on that, but yeah. One thing, this, Blake, I know you were kind of steering somewhere. I don't want to.
No, I'm just keeping it going. We're good. Okay. Yeah, take us where you want to go.
One thing I wanted to, and this is kind of separate from the episode necessarily, but Ken, I wanted to get your opinion, and also I just heard a lot of talk about this. I know a lot of people were sad that there was no Caduceus. He was one of my favorite characters, so of course I was, in a perfect world, I would love to have Caduceus there. But obviously that's Talison's decision. If he wanted to play Kingsley, I support it. But it's just, we kind of already briefly touched on this. It's just interesting because this is our first exposure to Kingsley, and it's still kind of muddy. I tried to explain it. I'm sure I explained it poorly earlier in the episode, exactly who Kingsley is.
You did great, actually. It made perfect sense. I mean, obviously the mechanics of like how these things happen was fuzzy, but it made perfect sense. So keep going though.
But yeah, so I was just gonna get, kind of, well, both of you guys, honestly, just first impressions of Kingsley. Ken, I didn't know if you were missing Caduceus as well. I thought it was kind of funny how they touched on it with like that one moment. They're like, well, we should message Caduceus to see if he wants to come, and they're like, oh yeah, I mentioned this in the recap, but we have never explained it. So Blake, that moment where Yasha was like, I can message him. There was like this inside joke toward the ends of campaign 2 where, because of spells that like Veth and Jester were casting, the message spell, like Yasha thought she had that ability because like their voices would appear in her head and she could respond to them. She's like, oh, I have this power. So Yasha thinks she can like message people across the world. So that's why she was like, I'll message Caduceus. And that's why he didn't respond, because she doesn't actually have that ability.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought she has no ability.
Okay. I thought, she had the spell and like Caduceus just wasn't responding. I was like, okay, that makes sense.
Another continued little in joke from the campaign. Yeah. And may have heard the term Chaos Crew. That was coined during the Mighty Nein campaign, and the Chaos Crew was basically what was it? Bo, Jester, and Not, they would mess with people, hardcore. And when Yasha decided that she had this mystical power, they like messed with her and made her believe that she did.
Okay.
So,
yeah. And then for me, Will, Caduceus, I never saw that character because I never saw up to Molly Mock's death.
Right.
So I was totally indifferent. I think what was tough for me was, so like someone like Jester, who is such a pronounced character, so to speak. As soon as Laura Bailey was playing Jester, it was very familiar and kind of a return to that memory of like, oh, these characters that were so much fun. But with Talison's character, I just kept seeing from campaign 3, Ashton.
Oh,
I just kept seeing, I kept wanting to think of him as Ashton because that is, I mean, we're 40 episodes deep into campaign 3. And so that's just, and it's odd how I did that with him, but everyone else, it was like, oh yeah, that's Bo. Yeah. Yasha was still a little fuzzy for me because I think Ashley Johnson was maybe absent quite a bit at the start. I think I only saw a couple episodes with her actually there. But yeah,
Yeah, she was still doing Blind Spot at that time. So they wrote
hashtag cancel blind spot.
they wrote a bit of Ashley's backstory that she would just disappear all the time and literally just cratered off into the wilderness at random moments.
Yeah.
That conveniently went away as a property of her character once Blind Spot was over.
Yeah. Okay. Well-
But yeah, so Ken, what were your thoughts on like Kingsley just in general? And
I agree. I saw a lot of Ashton in his portrayal of Kingsley. Kingsley is supposed to be a completely different character than Mollymauk, so he can't play him as Mollymauk, right?
Yeah, personality was different than I remembered from Mollymauk. Go ahead.
It's a different personality. It's a different person, a different entity, and I think Taliesin really was mourning the loss of Mollymauk, right? I think he really didn't want to let go of that character. He had such big plans for him, and he had so much invested, and his death was really a kick in the pants when it occurred. Like it was not a happy time for the fandom, for the cast. It was really a big shock. It was the first actual permadeath in Critical Role history, right? Like no one had ever completely died in that way, really. That there's another huge spoiler for C1 there, but we'll leave that for another time. But yeah, I saw distinct personality traits being portrayed in Kingsley that I associated heavily with Allison's portrayal of Ashton. So I can see exactly what you're saying there. And it being a blank slate for us, we don't really know who this guy is. There's nothing for us to layer on him except the stuff that we've seen most recently, right? So it is not, it's not just playing Ashton, that's for sure. It's different than that. But there were definitely some flavor of that in some way.
What class is Kingsley?
Rogue Bloodhunter, right?
Yeah,
okay.
That's right.
Okay, so still has the Bloodhunter element.
Which is funny because, you know, Travis as Chetney in Campaign 3 was like, I'm now the highest level Bloodhunter that has been on Critical Role, kind of as a rib to Taliesin. And now Taliesin is once again the highest level.
Yeah, back on top. Okay.
That's funny. But as far as Caduceus, I also loved Caduceus. It was a slow burn for me during the campaign. Like it took a while for me to appreciate Allison's portrayal, but after 10 20 episodes, you can't help but just love him because it takes a while to put on a new outfit, right? Like he had to get into the flow of it, and once he was fully inhabiting Caduceus, it was awesome.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead, Will.
I was just gonna say, speaking of putting on a new outfit, it's kind of a lame segue, but bear with me. Since this was our first exposure to Kingsley, I mean, I didn't really know what to expect. I mean, you heard the kind of muddy backstory of how he came to be. Like, I wasn't sure if he was gonna have similar mannerisms to Molly, to Lucian. Didn't know. So coming in and seeing that he was basically completely different from both of those characters, wholly his own thing. Obviously, there's shades here and there of both. One thing I did notice that I thought was interesting is in the character art. So this is the new outfit part. Kingsley is like covered head to toe, which Molly / Lucian had tattoos everywhere. So I just thought it was interesting that maybe like he doesn't want, like, he's not that he's ashamed or anything, but like that's not him. So he covers those up because he's his own character. And I just thought that was, and maybe I'm reading way too much into it, but I just thought that was a nice like little character detail to be like, Kingsley's his own guy, let's new outfit, new character, who dis. So
yeah, he doesn't want to rep the old guy's choices.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, moving on to, we're getting towards the end of our conversation. Let's talk implications of what's happened in the back half of this episode, and potentially what do we think is waiting us in the continuation about a week and a half from now. So implications, like what's going to be happening moving forward, do you guys think?
Combat.
Yeah.
I mean, it's gonna be one big long combat, I suspect.
Do you think? I agree. What I'm curious on, I think they've probably released how long the episode is, but I don't have that information in front of me. This first episode was roughly 5 hours, I think. So assuming the next one's around that length, do you think they have enough time to? There's obviously going to be some temple encounter, either with the Storm Giant and the Mage, or whatever, right? So that's one combat, presumably. Do you think they're going to be successful in releasing Uk'otoa, and there's going to be an Uk'otoa combat as well? Because I think there is the space for it, but that feels rather tight in just one episode. Or do you think the final encounter is going to be with the Storm Giant, and they successfully prevent Uk'otoa from being released?
What do you think, Blake?
I don't know. I don't think they're going to release Uk'otoa, because we know this is 8 or 9 years away from campaign 3. And I feel like, I mean, the campaign 3 heroes are, totally it's naive to the like things that are happening around the world, like didn't know what the Cerberus assembly was, things like that. So part of me though wonders if we would have had some kind of Uk'otoa reference, but then maybe that would have spoiled the 2-part. I don't know. I do think it's gonna be mostly combat. I did check the time. It's 5 hours and 45 minutes for part 2.
Okay.
So quite a bit of a longer episode. Absolutely, they're going to fight the Storm Giant, the Mage, and the Entourage. Who's to say what happens? Can they not destroy the Cloven Crystal, by the way? Is it indestructible or?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think they tried in previous, because there were 3 of them, and I think they attempted to damage one of them at least, and were unable to.
Okay.
Should they have not kept it on their person while sailing the sea? Probably.
Oh, yeah,
but,
I love Travis's like, yeah, I had no exit strategy whatsoever and just kept this on me the whole time.
Personally, I think that that may have been a plot hook choice, maybe between Matt and Travis.
Yeah.
For purposes of shenanigans, and they do that kind of thing, right? Like, we want to have shenanigans,
Yeah.
What kind of shenanigans do we want to have? So let's lay the path for those to occur. I personally think we're 100% going to have combat, probably for a significant portion of the episode, with the both the crew that's approaching the temple. I suspect there's probably also more inside the temple.
Yeah.
So they're gonna get pinchered. And I suspect that obviously this is pre-recorded, so they know the outcome now, but I'm not certain that it was a guarantee that Uk'otoa wouldn't be freed. Right? I don't think that they would have preordained the ending. So
Yeah.
I suspect that Matt is the kind of GM that's like, the clock is ticking, right? If they had, effed off to, go see Essek for a day, and they got there, and now Uk'otoa is ravaging the Menagerie Coast. What now?
Yeah.
I don't know if we'll see actual Uk'otoa. I don't think we're going to. I think that the team has managed to do the things correctly, get ahead of that. I think they got the jump on team that was headed to the temple. So I think we will not see Uk'otoa. I suspect we will see more combat than just the people that we already saw.
Is Uk'otoa sort of the spin on 5e's or D&D's Kraken?
It's not like, sort of. I think Matt one time mentioned it was like a Kraken on steroids, basically.
Okay.
So it's not like literally just a kraken. Like there's
Well, there's like a kraken deity-ish in D&D, in the Wizards of the Coast D&D. And I know Matt's taken a lot of inspiration from different characters from there. But okay, here's a question for you guys: are there any chances that we see the permadeath of a character, or even a TPK, like in a calamity-esque ending?
There's certainly a chance of that, but if that quote unquote had occurred in the time travel-y, timey-wimey, wibbly-wobbly thing we're doing here, going back in Exandria history, it would have a massive impact on the history of Exandria as we know it. Current day C3, right? So I don't think that they can have that, right? Because there's no indication that Uk'otoa ravaged the world in
Right.
current known history, right?
I
And
see what you're saying.
right, so it would be very revisionist or alternate university, or I'm not sure how they could justify such a thing. Because the only way we could see a total party death be if they fail. If they fail, Katoa is released.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like those are the consequences of that. So I don't think it can happen. And I in Matt's way, he's railroading this just like any DM has to railroad any campaign to get
Like abbreviated
to occur where they occur. The fight on the ocean, the Lucidian ocean fight, was not winnable. Right? They could not win that fight.
Right.
It was a runaway, get beat down and runaway fight, and they knew it. Right? You don't take 61 damage from one strike and think, oh well, yeah, we could win this with the three of us. It's just it's not winnable, right? So they weren't gonna succeed right there. But he designs his encounters to be appropriate to the challenge. So I really don't think we may see singular character death. That could certainly happen, but
maybe
total
Kingsley,
party?
since no one knows who he is. So
Well, he's expendable.
Towson's like, again, really?
Yeah, I'm with Ken. I definitely could see somebody dying. I don't see a TPK happening. That'd be crazy though. I don't think Matt would like pull punches necessarily. So I think it's possible, but I really don't think that would happen.
It definitely doesn't seem like it's with Calamity. We knew it was. I mean, we didn't know, but we kind of knew. Hey, we're all dying.
Yeah.
Like by the end of this,
Yeah.
which is definitely not the not the writing direction or the implications. But anyway, continue.
Well, I was just gonna quickly say that I'm kind of on the fence on if I think Uk'otoa will get released and there will be an encounter, but I want there to be, because I kind of almost feel like it would be unsatisfying if it didn't, because unless they find a way to destroy the crystal all of a sudden, that's always going to be looming overhead. If like, well, what if
Just got to go to Mount Doom.
yeah, I guess so. So it feels like a lot to pack in one episode, but I'm hoping that there is an encounter with Uk'otoa.
Is Uk'otoa like on the same level of like the gods, like the deities? Like
it's not a deity, but it's
more like a demigod or something. It's like a category down. He's definitely powered, but not like Wild Mother level.
Yeah. Okay.
God.
Well, it is seemingly the Wild Mother's temple. So maybe there'll be a divine intervention of some kind. So
definitely primed for a cool moment with Ford, especially since those are his two tethering forces at play here.
This really is a Ford story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Well, gentlemen, final thoughts on the episode or any other comments you want to make as we're wrapping up?
Yeah, I did have one other thing that I noted. In Bo's little exposition stuff, she was talking about how the Cerberus assembly was quiet, that they were doing nothing. And I found it very interesting that they would call that out specifically, that Bo was like on that story,
Mm-hmm.
because that has implications toward events of campaign 3. And and obviously doing nothing isn't a very exciting implication, right? But the fact that they're watching and that she's specifically in charge of that endeavor makes me wonder if we'll catch some Mighty Nine cameos in campaign 3.
That would certainly be interesting because we know her and Caleb both were very like keen on snuffing some of that corruption out. So yeah, this is 6 months after C2, so C3 is what, several years down the line. So it'll be interesting to see if, I mean, we at least know that what's his name, Ludinus is still apparently the head of the Cerberus Assembly several years later. So yeah, I wonder if we'll get any connective tissue that lets us draw any lines there.
It's certainly possible. They've made it so that it can happen with these connections. So
yeah,
will it? I don't know. And the other thing is, I loved Sam's little monologue about end of the world is nigh and no one knows it, and we're the only ones that can stop us. We're totally on brand. Like that literally happened to them multiple times, and it was kind of the direct opposite of the famous Vox Machina, save the world and everybody knows it kind of thing. It was so funny.
Yeah, and I guess
So
we don't really have time to get into it, but I was wondering why the Mighty Nine didn't seem to have similar acclaim as Vox Machina, because I think in Exandria, the original like season, wasn't there like a statue to
Vex and Vex.
Yeah,
and
Byrodin, right? So like these are like heroes.
Yep.
I was surprised that the Mighty Nine seemingly are unknown of, as far as I could tell. I couldn't really see if that was the case.
Character choices. They were very much a different style of crew. They were morally gray. That's being generous.
Okay.
Yeah, and maybe we can dive more into that for part 2.
Yeah. Okay. Will, any final thoughts?
No, just that I'd love to hear what everyone else thought, especially if you are going to leave your thoughts. I'd love to know if you watched campaign 2 versus if you didn't. But yeah, I'm excited for the second episode for sure.
Okay. Well, yeah, like Will said, let us know in the comments what you thought about the episode. Any other details that we missed that you picked up on, or things you appreciated we didn't talk about, let us know. And then we'll be back. So the second episode airs on December 1st. So the three of us, Ken included, is going to be back to talk about part 2 here in a couple of weeks. And in the meantime, absolutely check out Ken's channel at Cy Bella. It's Cy and Bella Reactions. You can find it on YouTube.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll link it in the description as well.
Right. Don't forget, you can check us out on any of the podcast platforms. We're at the Pixelists on Twitter, and we would appreciate you guys letting us know what you thought. So, having said that, thumbnail, guys, we got to do a thumbnail.
Oh, yeah, I don't know.
A 3-person thumbnail. Out. Yeah, let's do the wild out. I love that.
Wild out.
All right, yeah, let's do that. Out. All right, 3, 2, 1. That's so great. All right, well, we'll catch you guys later, and thanks for tuning in. See ya.
Bye, y'all.